Good morning, and welcome to the live online Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Urbana-Champaign. I am Emily McKown, Youth Coordinator of this congregation and Executive Director at Channing Murray Foundation just down the road. We know some of you listening this morning are a few blocks away, and some of you are on the other side of the country. We know there are many ways you could be spending your Sunday morning, and we thank you for joining us in community this morning. You can follow along with the order of service at the link below the video, and please introduce yourself in the chat. If you have a joy or sorrow you'd like to be read aloud later in the service, you can send your joy or sorrow to joysandsorrows@uucuc.org. Each Sunday, as a part of our commitment to waking up, we begin with a land acknowledgement of the indigenous nations of this land. Wherever you are listening, please bring to mind the indigenous peoples of your place. There will be a moment of silence after the acknowledgement. We recognize and acknowledge that we gather today on indigenous land, taken through deception, coercion, and violence. We acknowledge the continued displacement and oppression of Native people and honor their commitments to survival, identity, and the protection of our world. When I sat down to finally write this reflection, after wanting to discuss this topic with you all year, very unexpectedly, I started weeping. It felt akin to the crying that I would do at the end of a UU youth conference, or the end of Youth Week at Camp Unistar. Sometimes you would cry just because everybody else is crying, but for me, many of the goodbyes were an authentic welling and purging of all the grief and sadness I had felt the whole year, articulated in tears and hugs with the friends who made me feel the most safe, the most seen, and most loved. I discovered a piece called Children of a Different Tribe, written by Sharon Wong Colligan. It so accurately describes the energy and spirit of UU youth cons, which I regularly attended and organized as a teen. She describes the very tangible and palpable transition that many cons create in a short 3-day weekend. From a casual adult-like coffee house style gathering to something completely transformative. The first night is slower, a little awkward. It resembles something like a meet and greet you would expect out of a conference. But on the second day, Colligan writes, just after breakfast and before the workshop, something is different. If this were a play, you'd think that scene 2 was supposed to represent an alternate reality, not the same people. The participants are now sitting close to one another in groups or piles. Their bodies lean trustingly against one another. Hugs have become part of a normal greeting. Reassuring and affectionate touch has become part of a normal conversation. Normal conversation is no longer the polite social chat of the evening before. Now it is an ever free-flowing sharing of the heart, of real life issues, or a free-flowing sharing of silliness, of spontaneous word games, and free association humor. Something has melted. The normal adult well-being people claim to be feeling during the last night's music performance now seems like a distant and shallow mask. Walking into the conference after a morning errand in the outside world, I can feel the conference like a strong energy field that is warm, like a physical warmth, relaxing, like a bubble bath or a day at the beach. It is this energy field that the YRUU call community. And Colligan calls it the magic pool. It wasn't until I read that piece did I realize I've waded in those waters, and that magic pool wasn't an accident. It was carefully facilitated and willed into being. What goes into the magic pool, and how do we keep it alive? How can we share it beyond our UU youth culture? Today, we will focus on the power of young people in our faith movement. But first, let's light our chalice with a few of our young leaders, Jordan Simons, Emma Herzog, and Celia Barbieri.
We light this chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition, to mark out this time together as special and worthy. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, we invite you to join us in lighting it and speaking these shared words as printed on your screen and in your order of service. As we kindle this flame, we reignite our commitment to our congregational mission to build community, seek inspiration, promote justice, and find peace.
I know, I know, I know this rose will open. I know my fears will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know fears will burn away. This rose will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will burn away. I know will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fears will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fears will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know, Sometimes that hymn feels like a bit of a reassurance in a time of uncertainty. Like it's sung in winter when the buds haven't yet graced us with their presence. I think, I hope, I know this rose will open. Sometimes you need to will a bloom into being with intention, hard work, a blanket or tarp from the snow, perhaps. We are here to sing in the spring this morning. For those of you who are fairly new to Unitarian Universalism, you may not know that it is quite uncommon for UU children and youth to remain church members into adulthood. I'm one of those statistical outliers, born and raised, and so is Reverend Florence and Sally. And if you too were raised in this tradition, I want to hear from you. There is much speculation as to why UU youth stay when other religious counterparts might have as much as half of their youth stick around, even in the face of secularism as a global trend. And instead of asking, why do some UU youth stay when so many of their friends choose to leave, I'd like to ask, what are the spiritual needs regardless of church status? And how can we as individuals and a congregation show up and meet them? To prepare for this service, I started asking around, calling young UU leaders from Boston to San Francisco. And as I dug into the history of UU youth leadership, I was heartened to find so much potential. I can feel a shift as we sharpen our focus on young people and support them, as we affirm the eighth principle and uproot white supremacy. And as we build the world in which we want to live, I realize we come from a long line of young folks sticking their necks out to insist on a better way. For much of my young adult years, which I spent away from the church, I was looking for a story that would root me to the past and carry me into the future. I was looking for my ancestry. statistical outlier I may be, but I choose to stay here with this tradition because Florence, Michelle, and so many of you saw potential in me and gave me the opportunity to dig into why and how I was raised UU. Whether it was the young Universalists speaking up for abolition right here in Urbana when our town was a mere 300 buildings before the Civil War, or in the 1930s, there we had peace caravans, young UUs scraping dollars together, finding hand-me-down cars in the 30s and driving across the country to speak out against an arms race and to rally for peace with the real threat of World War. Or you may remember when young people in this church a century ago pushed for the affirmation from their elders for their right to dance. This is our chosen ancestry. We may not be related by genealogy, but we are bound by our persistence to make a better world. Just like my mother and my grandmother does at the end of every hard frost, we learn from last year's harvest. We roll up our sleeves and do the hard work of growing change. Did you know that 100 years ago our church was actually 2 churches and 2 different buildings? Here's a little video to share a story about the other buildings some of our younger viewers might not have seen yet.
Did you hear that? We're here in Urbana, the old church building. It's now called the Channing Murray. It's quiet on campus. Every now and again I hear a noise. Did you hear it? It sounds like it's coming from inside. Come with me.
Seems okay in here. Sounds like it's coming from the basement. It kind of sounds like running water. Follow me. You know, the Red Herring restaurant is down there, but they're closed right now. Many years ago, the basement is where Sunday school classes happened. What do you think that noise could be? What is that noise?
Maybe the magic pool has been here all along.
It was Ron Kester, who tends to the Channing Murray building, who told me about the natural spring that lives in the earth below the Red Herring. It was 1949 that the Unitarian Church decided they needed space for their children and youth, and they lifted the entire building up on stilts to dig out a basement. Later in the service, you'll see the window wells they created to haul out the soil. And little did they know at the time, there was a natural spring underneath the building, an underground source of water, of constant running water. There's much below the surface of the work we do today. Each Sunday, we bring our individual joys and sorrows to this time together. Whatever is on your heart this morning, let our blessing song wash over you or join in. You can send a joy or sorrow to be shared aloud by sending an email to joysandsorrows@uucuc.org. We've got a sorrow and a joy from Beth Simpson. Sorrow that the best we could hope for justice after the murder of George Floyd was to convict and imprison another human being. Glad that in this case the legal system and other officers finally stopped siding with police perpetrators, which happens about once in 2,000 police killings. And a huge joy that local youth came together on Friday to offer each other connection and visions of a world without police violence. Thank you, Beth. Well said. We will be posting any joys or sorrows I may have missed in this week's e-news. If we did not share your joy or sorrow aloud this morning, know that whatever befalls us in life, we are held in the loving embrace of this community. Now, Juan Camacho will accompany us for a time of reflection and meditation.
This is the power of YRUU.
Had adults that were
A
safe.
safe space to meet like-minded youth.
Shaped my view of the world ever since.
Feel like I could be myself.
Back in January, I mentioned to some close friends that I wanted to make a documentary about the Young Religious Unitarian Universalists, YRUU. That evening, I sent out a survey, and it's now March, and we have been flooded with enthusiasm.
Took the best parts of the best people I knew and used that as a blueprint.
This feeling of unconditional love.
Be around other people who are also on the same journey.
For the crazy, wacky, beautifully flawed person I was becoming.
So now my goal is to tell these shared stories, not only because YRUU doesn't exist continentally anymore, but also because this program helped shape and save lives.
It is because of YRU that I am alive.
There were other kids my age who would accept me for who I was.
A small team and myself have formed, and we now have this huge task in our hands. And we're realizing that we really can't do it alone. We can't do it alone contextually, emotionally, or financially.
I'm grateful to have had a space as a youth that fostered an ethic of social justice and equity.
Some of my fondest spiritual memories to this day come from that time.
I feel so lucky and honored that I got to be a part of it.
If you are a part of this program, you not only can support us through sending us money, but also just by talking about this with others. If you don't know what YRUU is, then, well, we have something to share with you.
Please take a moment to find the link in the YouTube description to the fundraising campaign for the documentary, which is doing the critical work of telling YRUU history at a time when it's needed most. When I asked for a history lesson from our young leaders across the country, the overwhelming sentiment was that real resources were lacking for youth and young adult ministries. Real jobs for young leaders, and a lack of support for the kinds of programs our young people want to lead. In this book about our early 20th century UU youth movements, We Would Be One, they write, quote, "There's one thing we can count on, that the youth will continue to reinvent the wheel." We agree. We use our people of progression, of progressive values, and we will always look to our young people to keep us honest, to keep our work relevant, to keep us critical of the world we inherit. But I see our work in a little different light. We are not reinventing the wheel. We are building a new way. With every generation, we build upon the work of our predecessors, and it is only with the support of our elders can we do this effectively. I'm pleased to know some of the youth and young adult leaders that walked out of their roles in leadership at our National UU General Assembly last year in protest of fair compensation. They've put in countless hours to work to fight for a fair wage for their highly skilled labor in conference organizing and facilitation, and this year have won fair and just pay. This is not the work of reinventing wheels. This is the work of building bridges out of hope and persistence. I know you know this. I know I am preaching to the choir. This faith and this congregation has resourced me as a staff member, as a young leader, both financially and spiritually. And for that, I am so grateful. Truly, without you, I may not have heard my call to ministry. I see this church and our strategic vision lead the way towards investing in young people in the way they need and desire. And I'm proud to do this with you. With a lot of hope and persistence, together we will build our most beloved community. As UUs, we affirm that we are part of an interconnected web of all existence. And we honor our connections with each other, with the wider community, and with the world. Each Sunday, we share half our offering with an organization in alignment with our values. This month, we are sharing our offering with the Prairie Rivers Network, an organization which does the critical work of protecting our sacred waters throughout the region. The offering will now be received.
Fear is the heart of love. So
Thank you, Emma. This song came up when I did a search for UU youth music, and I mentioned it to Emma, who now works at the Red Herring, which has continued to be a place for radical young folks for decades. Thank you for sharing that, Emma. You inspire us all so much. I Will Follow You Into the Dark came out when I was a teenager. And I attended every summer a UU youth camp. It's on an island inside a large lake at the headwaters of the Mississippi. Many of you know and have attended Camp Unistar. There, we played cards, we learned trades, debated philosophy, swam in the moonlight, and danced our hearts out. The half-hour pontoon ride from the mainland was an experience in itself. The June sun glistening on the open waters off Cass Lake. The ride there was ever buzzing with anticipation and expectation. The ride home was nostalgic, soft, loving, and often sleep-deprived. The boat ride to and from camp was the site for me where the magic pool came and went. Only a few of the 100 or so friends I made in UU programs as a kid do I know deeply now as an adult. And even fewer still identify as UU, but I carry them with me my life long. In many ways, our liberal religious tradition is still in its youth. The article by Hazel May from 2017, where I first discovered the articulation of the magic pool, argues that the structure of the UU church is made for those who convert to it, but not for those who are raised within it. The shared ministry, the circular worship style, and the relationships that we encourage in our children and youth look very different than the linear, more traditional church. And the church services our abridged youth often pass up on Sunday mornings once they've graduated. When I think of the awesome creatives, activists, and thinkers I met when I was a teen, and whether or not this church has the capacity to provide a spiritual sanctuary for them, or for the youth and young adults of tomorrow, for that matter. I have to be honest, I have some doubts. Doubts that an institution can meet the needs of such a diverse group of people who hold a complexity of beliefs and identities. Doubts that we can untangle the old traditions which ground us, carry forward that which liberates us, and have the courage to just leave the rest behind. But isn't doubt a friend to the young UU? We teach our children to be critical. And it makes me think of Reverend Edna McDonald, our first woman minister here in this church, preaching in the early 1900s, even before women had the right to vote. Might she have had doubts? Or the young Unitarians and young Universalists getting together far before their elders. Might they have had doubts that the congregation would follow their lead? Whether you were raised UU or not, we all have to contend with doubt as we work to build the world in which we want to live. Doubts about our democracy, our climate, or doubts about new relationships, new jobs, or even doubts in ourselves. And remember that rose we are called to open at the beginning of the service? I think I hope, I know, this rose will open. In the face of doubt, we persist to build a better world. And I have to believe that as we work to build a beloved community, ours is one where young people of all identities feel seen, heard, and respected. Can we cultivate the spiritual sanctuary that the next generation craves? One where they pack the house and raise their voice. Can we create a magic pool that is not relegated to a nominal faraway weekend or the downstairs classroom ever tucked away, but instead keep alive a pool that is overflowing with mystery, wonder, and magic through our every single day? I want us all to live in that sacred space between doubt and hope. Come on in. The water is fine. And who better to sing us into that space this morning than my oldest friend, Ben Jocelyn. We met at camp when we were just 12 years old. And he's the one who connected me to this town I love so dearly. Thank you, Ben. Please join in as we sing our closing hymn, Love Will Guide Us.
Hello to everyone from the headwaters of the Mississippi River. It's beautiful up here, and they're thinking to put a pipeline through it, so do what you can to say no. But also, Emily asked me to sing you a lovely song. She rearranged it, so hopefully you like it. It sounds better when she's singing it, but I do what I can. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way down the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the dark night. If you cannot sing like the angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the dark night. If you cannot sing like the angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the the dark night.
We extinguish our chalice with these shared words written by Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Elizabeth Sally Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.